Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Jaffray. Francois, how are you? You have yourself muted. I can't unmute you.
Oh,
there we go.
Got it now? Okay.
How are you doing?
It's Monday. I'm doing great. How are you? How was your weekend?
I'm good. It was good. Went to the pool with some friends. Saw my parents for a little bit. It was a good weekend. How was yours? How was the wedding?
It was beautiful. It was nice. About 40 people in the wedding. It's in the venue itself. So it was smaller, more intimate. Everyone was able to actually talk, danced a lot. So I'm pooped, but I'm sure it was beautiful. So.
And you got in super late last night, right? You said why were your flights getting delayed?
There was no explanation. Oh, wait, actually they did explain it. He said the computer in the undercarriage in the front of the plane, when it was supposed to take off from the other airport, something was wrong with that. And so they had to do maintenance on that. And so it was a small plane too. Whatever. There was only 2 flights from Boston to Pittsburgh. So there was nothing that we could have switched to. So
I was going to say, I would have requested another plane. Once you talk about computers messing up, I'm either driving or get me somewhere else. I don't care.
Yeah, no, it worked out. I'm here. So
good. Well, welcome. We're happy to have you. And we're also very happy to have our good friend Jeremy coming on. But before we do that, if you guys are watching us live, please be sure to give us a comment. If you're watching the replay, do #team replay. And be sure, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or any of your other favorite podcast platforms, to give us a review and let us know what you think of the show. So today we have the 3rd installment of our 4-part series with Elevate Brands. And today we're going to be talking all about how to maximize your brand's value to prepare it for sale from the beginning. So starting the end in mind. And to help us learn about that today, we have the Chief M&A Officer at Elevate Brands, Jeremy Bell. Jeremy, how are you doing today, dear?
Yeah, excellent. Happy to be here. So nice to meet you all. And yeah, this is a topic that I'm pretty passionate about. So looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Happy to have you here as well. And it's funny, I had a chat with Rob and I was like, are you and Jeremy related at all? He was like, well, yeah, we're twins. He was like, maybe we don't look as much alike in adulthood. I'm like, well, when you throw a beard on somebody, they look totally different. So he's got the full beard going on right now. I'm like, that does make you look a little bit different, but you definitely are related.
Yeah, definitely related. We're not identical. So it does confuse a bunch of people.
And you are calling in from Austin as well, correct?
Yeah, so the team, our business is kind of split in the US between New York and Austin. And, I'm based down in Austin with the rest of the M&A team and some of the other execs. And yeah, we love it here. It's just a really good, vibrant city. There's a lot of growth. One thing I do every time I go to a new city in the world is I count the number of cranes in the sky because it's just a good kind of gauge. No, it's just a good gauge of kind of economic activity in that town. And, twice I've been to Athens, Greece, and I've only counted two cranes in the sky, whereas you get to Austin and I've counted 29. So it's there's just this thriving community here of, people migrating to the city, and it's great. It's really, really great.
Well, and Austin's kind of becoming like the new Silicon Valley, right? There's so many tech companies moving out there.
Oh, 100%. And you can kind of see, just the changing face of the city, whether it's people in your building or people that you meet when you go out on the weekends or whatever. You can really sense that just the face of the city is starting to change. And, our office is next to the Google building, and that's basically done. So, it's really, I think Elon Musk described it as the biggest boomtown in the US for the next 50 years. And, on the ground here, you kind of get that sense.
That makes sense. Have you been to Atlanta and counted the cranes in Atlanta?
No, not yet. It's a city I haven't hit yet. So we'll see.
There's a ton.
Come visit us and get the count.
Yeah.
It's everywhere, man. I swear there's always, and road construction. There's never a section of any interstate that's not being worked on at all times in Atlanta. That's what makes the traffic so bad. I'm convinced. And nobody knows how to drive. Getting off my soapbox. So Jeremy, tell us a little bit about your background. So have you always kind of been in the mergers and acquisition space, or did you kind of, I mean, how does that work out?
Yeah, so I started my career in kind of mergers and acquisitions, and sort of worked that through as a young guy. I started just before the kind of the in 2008 with the global financial crisis. So literally like 3 months into my job, that whole thing kind of rolled out, which was, in some ways it's good to see the end of an economic cycle because it's it grounds you at the start of your career. So I played that out. I then worked in private equity for a number of years. And then after working in private equity, I also worked in-house in some other large corporates in Australia. And then, in 2019, my wife, she got offered a great job with Nike in the US. So we pulled up stumps and moved to America. And I didn't have a job, but I kind of backed myself to find, it's the world's largest economy. I kind of backed myself to find a good opportunity for me to work on. And when we got here, it was like, at the time we're living in Portland, Oregon, and it's not the kind of capital of, for the skill set that I have, it's not really the capital of where you'd want to be. Like you'd be much better off being based in, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, or LA. So it basically forced me to look at other opportunities, and that's kind of how I stumbled on Elevate Brands. Got introduced to the two co-founders, Ryan and James, and it was pretty much a 20-person business at that point.
Wow.
And they were looking at buying e-commerce brands. So I was like, look, I can help you with this. This is what I've done my entire career. So that's kind of how I got involved and got started.
Nice. And your wife must have already then been working full-time remote with Nike, so she was kind of able to move around.
Yeah, we kind of split at the moment between Portland and Austin. But that's kind of been the benefit of working remote is you can kind of, all of last year we pretty much just sat away at home at the desk just building the business, which was it was kind of the perfect time to do it.
Yeah, it definitely sucked having to be stuck at home, but it opened up a lot of opportunity for stuff like that. So silver linings.
100%. Yeah. One of them, yeah.
And did you have any experience prior with e-commerce when you were in private equity?
So it was kind of yes, yeah. The answer is yes, I did. So like when I started in mergers and acquisitions, I was really focused on retail. So did a lot of kind of small mid-market deals in Australia. The private equity firm that I worked for in Australia, one of the partners there was probably one of the best retail investors in Australia. Like his track record was excellent. So there was just so much that I learned from working for from that guy. His name was Trent. And a lot of the sayings that he have kind of like I've carried with me into Elevate. So, there's just a bunch of sayings that people use here, which I've kind of picked up from him. And we just carried over. So, yeah.
No, that's good. I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into retail, or a lot that goes into e-commerce that obviously directly ties into just general retail, brick and mortar retail even. I think it was either Emma or Destiny that was describing end caps on stores and how you would walk through the aisles of stores and how that works with merchandising and of course, like the visual brand representation and how that all really ties together. And that just really kind of gave me a new perspective of how e-commerce even works and how I find myself parsing through like an Amazon listing or a store itself, or I guess a Shopify store in general. How was a transition going into Elevate? Because was it already Elevate when you were there at 20 people?
Yeah, so at the time the business was called Recom Trading, which was like a combination of like anyway, the old name was Recom Trading, which was like retail commodities, because the business at the time was, it was a wholesale business of buying and reselling goods online. So, we built that to like a $25 million revenue business, just buying last year's inventory and reselling it on Amazon for a profit. So there was no real brand. That's an interesting business model. It spits out a lot of cash and is super profitable. But when I joined, like the realization that we kind of made is, we could have turned that into $100 million business, but the value of that business is always going to be capped because there's no real brand there. If all you're doing is just reselling someone else's product, like, all someone needs to do to compete with you is get better access to inventory, and there's not a lot of value there in your business. And then the other thing we realized is that Amazon was getting tighter and stricter and stricter at policing who was allowed to sell what to counter people selling fraudulent inventory. So at that point we kind of made the flip to like, the better business model here is to own your own private label brands. And the more that we've looked at it, effectively Amazon is filled with a bunch of well-known brands, private label brands that people have started that look and feel like a brand, and then effectively a bunch of product listings. And those product listings, they have potential to be great brands because they sell stuff that customers love, but they don't have that kind of full wrapper around it that people expect to see. And our thesis is that the more you make it look and feel like a proper brand that people are used to seeing in a supermarket or in brick and mortar, the more successful you'll be long term. So that's kind of when we started, we were basically reselling shoes, but the thesis now is let's build brands.
I think shoes is something everybody gets into at one point or another. Jack even does that. He's like, I got this really expensive pair of shoes for like $200, but it's okay because I might resell them one day for $1,000. I'm like, okay, but how long have you had them? He's like, 4 years. Like,
seriously, it's a great way. It is a great way to make money. Like, we've met like a bunch of like effectively like 16 to 18-year-old kids that have just mastered the art of buying rare sneakers, sitting on them for 3 years and then just flipping them for a profit later, and they crush it. So it's interesting through e-commerce. There's just many, many different ways to make money.
Yeah, that is true. That is.
It really makes sense with Brian's background, especially looking at it as a commodity trade. I guess at the beginning.
Yeah.
And even nowadays, when you go through Amazon, I don't know how they're going to avoid just having everything be a commodity, other than, of course, establishing yourself maybe off of Amazon with a better brand awareness. But I mean, you go on now and you type in mugs or coffee mugs and you get a million different coffee mugs. How is that not a commodity? A lot of them are the exact same, probably from the same factory or just different storefronts from the same manufacturer. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. So when I look at businesses to buy, if I look at a business and it is just a commodity product and it looks and feels like everything else and they're all priced the same, then who wins? The lowest cost provider of the product wins. So what gets us excited when we look at businesses or think about the brands in our portfolio and how we grow them is, really, really focus on trying to differentiate your product offering to customers. How can you make it better? And better could be, we think about better through the lens of you've got better marketing, you've got better branding, you've got a better product with like unique features that no one else has, and then maybe your offer is better. So where someone could be selling just one commodity product, you're bundling it with other value adds to the purchase that makes it more appealing than your competitors. So the key is to really focus hard on thinking about how can you be differentiated and better. And if you do that, then I think that will give you, kind of sustainable long-term advantages. Because otherwise if you're competing with people just importing a product directly from China, using Alibaba or whatever the case is, that potentially is a race to the bottom. And I think the age-old retail principle of good, better, best, in terms of you've got a good product that's slightly better, and then like the marquee gold standard product, that still applies, and it applies on Amazon. So if you go search in black office chairs, sure, you'll see the Amazon basic chair for like $50-$60, whatever it costs, but you'll also see the souped up, executive chair or the hardcore gaming chair for $350. We want to be focused on the $350 because the mindset of that consumer is, there is a place for value, but I think the more interesting part where we want to play is the kind of people that are, are more interested in the kind of differentiated purchase.
And that all obviously gets tied with IP, right?
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just make a customization and then the same factory that's producing your item compete with you, or a trade agent that you might not have known is also keeping an eye on your listing just makes the same thing. Or I guess, how much do you look into IP when you are assessing a brand?
It's so put it this way: businesses that have like trademarks, or so every business that we look at to acquire, one of the kind of key gating things is that they've got a trademark set up that covers their brand. And that's just one that's important, because if you have a trademark and you register it with Amazon, you get access to brand registry, and then there's a whole bunch of Amazon reward you by opening up a whole bunch of kind of new marketing levers and giving you different advertising options on the Amazon listing itself. And they also do things in the back end, like stop people from kind of changing your listings and hijacking you. So as a kind of ticket to game item, we most aggregators and acquirers like us expect to see that there's a trademark registered against the brand name. The second one where it gets really interesting is like, do they have a design or utility patent over the product? And if they do, like the difference in kind of price that people can command when they've got one can be as much as like one turn on the multiple when we acquire the business. So, if you've got a trademark, utility patents or design patents, the market could pay 4 for that business. But if you've got them locked in, you could get 5. So that's kind of a increase in your sale proceeds of up to 25%. And that's just simply by having a patent locked in. And the reason why it's so important is Amazon's got much better at enforcing those patents. So we've met businesses in the past who they locked in the patent. They went to Amazon and they created a case and said, "Can you please enforce the patent?" And their profit went from $200,000 a year to $1 million, literally overnight, because Amazon kicked off all their phony competitors. And these guys then went to kind of controlling the market, as they should, because they kind of invented the product.
Wow. That's
an
insane overnight success.
Yeah. And like the guy then, he sat there and he ran his business for another 9 months, and then he sold it, and he made, the financial outcome for them in that scenario was just, one would have provided you a nice outcome. The other provided like multi-million dollars in values that kind of went to the sellers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And is that looking at it from just a US perspective, or are you looking that they also have it filed on maybe global patents or trademarked in China if they're producing in China, for example, to prevent any export mishaps, which I think a lot of us have heard some of the horror stories, at least, of, someone filing it for their trademark, not allowing them to export their own goods until they pay them a certain amount. Not necessarily just from China, could be from any other country that they're producing in too. But I guess, what exactly are you looking for there? Are you looking just in the country that they're selling in?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my kind of advice to sellers is, when you package up and think about exiting your business, you want the future acquirer to see a massive runway of growth, and part of that massive runway of growth for groups like Elevate is kind of international expansion. So if we buy a brand that sells only in the US, when we look at and think about how we can grow the brand, expanding it into Canada, Mexico, EU, UK, they're very simple growth levers that we can pull post-acquisition just by sending inventory into the Amazon ecosystem in those markets. But what really helps us kind of get on and do that is, if you've got like your trademark, or you kind of trademark for your brand, as you said, like, get it registered in China or wherever it's manufactured, so you don't have that risk of one day someone comes out of the woodwork and says, "You're producing a product which I own I own the rights to that product in China, and you can't get it out of the country." Likewise, go and get that same brand name registered in all those kind of geographies, and then the same applies with the patent. And it costs a lot of money, and it does take a lot of time to get up. In some cases, it can take kind of 6 months to a year to get everything pushed through. So, one of the things I say to sellers is, you should start planning to sell your business the day that you start it, because then you're always ready to exit. So things like IP, patents, brand names, trademarks. The sooner you get onto that, the better. And I kind of gave that example of the valuation uplift that this person got from having it all locked in. That's real. So it's kind of worth the return on the cost of doing it. And it doesn't just go to like trademarks and IP and patents. Like, it also extends to Instagram handles, website domains, Facebook, all those sorts of kind of like secondary pieces of IP that we think about that are key to our growth, our growth kind of playbook. Get those locked in too, because they're often things that people miss, particularly sellers that, we meet some sellers who have caught lightning in a bottle, and they've got a great brand or they've got a great business that has grown really well, and then they just forget to do a lot of the small stuff. So they're simple things that you can put into place immediately.
And what are some things that would make a purchase go, like, not go through, like go under, or, I don't know how to phrase it, like that would make a deal fall through? There we go.
Deal killers.
Yes.
So the first, anytime like a buyer and seller come together, there's like this period of like, the seller, in most cases, the seller doesn't know the buyer and the buyer doesn't know the seller. The buyer may have a reputation, but like, which precedes them, which can be helpful. But there's this kind of like information asymmetry between both parties. So the only way to kind of bridge that is trust, and you can build trust as you work through the sale process. Like, the process to sell your business typically takes anywhere from kind of 30 to 60 days on average. And the number one reason that like I will happily kill a deal and move on with life and kind of focus on other opportunities is if we lose confidence or trust in the person selling the business, then ultimately that makes any buyer very nervous. And what happens when a buyer gets nervous? They perceive it as a risk. And if they're nervous, then typically means they'll either try to restructure the deal to compensate for that risk, or they'll, drop price or pull out in total. So how do you erode the trust of, as a seller, how do you erode the trust of a buyer? And it basically comes down to like, if, my view is being transparent and open and honest is the first step. So like, if I give you an example, there was one time we're buying a business, and it's quite common for, Amazon sellers to have some sort of, like you buy the product, there's a coupon code on it, please go to our website and I'll give you a free product. And then you kind of ask them at the end of that whole process to give you a review. And people used to say, give us a review and I'll pay you, but they've now kind of softened it to, hey, here's a free product, and if you like it, please feel free to give us a review. And most people will tend to give you a 5-star review. So it's kind of that practice is shades of grey. It's shades of grey. And so when we look at businesses to acquire, we spend a lot of time trying to pick up, have they done anything nefarious like that? And when we meet sellers, we ask them, it's like, have you done anything to increase your reviews or kind of game your ranking in the Amazon search algorithm? And all sellers will say no. But when we get stuck into underwriting, it's like, hey, like, there's a bunch of messages with people from, 2 years ago, and they're asking where their free product is for the 5-star review they gave you. Like, what happened there? And then when we go back and look at the data, it kind of looks like your review rate for that period was, 100%. And each of those reviews from our metrics looks like it was 5 stars. Like, what's going on? And when you kind of catch a seller out like that, they're either going to deny it, in which case we say, well, the facts are kind of the facts, or they're going to kind of come clean. And then you then just start second guessing them. So like that's an example of where like trust can get eroded. And depending on how you recover that kind of the relationship on that side, like that can, that's just a big thing. So, the other ways where we've had trust eroded is, sellers have given us invoices that don't tick and tie to bank accounts. And the more we probe, it's like, well, clearly that was a doctored invoice. Like, we just don't, we've got no confidence in the financials. And if we don't have confidence in the financials that you've given us, then we don't really have confidence in you as an individual. So, yeah, I think, being transparent, open, and honest, sophisticated buyers will pick up on things that they're worried about. And if there is anything in the closet that you're not sure of, just disclose it up front, then you never have to worry about it. Because when these things pop up, like, and you have a chat with the seller at the end of the process or a couple months after close, I often ask them, I'm like, hey, you knew about like this issue that was just kind of sitting there. Like, were you nervous about that? And they're like, yeah, I didn't sleep for like 3 weeks because I knew that eventually you would come across it. And it'd be like, you should have just disclosed it. And then there would have been like, it would have been out in the open. Then we could have made a decision about how to fix it. So that's the first one. Like, eroding a buyer's trust is probably the biggest reason that a deal will fall away. Mm-hmm. The other things that can kind of kill deals is, you've breached Amazon's terms of service, or you're threatening to get shut down. You've got a kind of bad run of defective product, which needs to be worked through. Because you haven't been on top of your quality control. There's ways to structure around that and solve it, but that does make it very hard. And one of the ones that we've come across, which sounds simple, is like, the first thing I tell sellers when we get into a process is run your business as if it's not going to be sold. Because, M&A processes, acquisition processes can change or fall over, or anything can kind of happen. And if you keep running the business as if it's not going to be sold, if the sale doesn't go through for any reason, then at least your business is still in a strong position. Because some sellers that we've met have kind of made the mistake of like, they just stopped ordering inventory because they're like, well, in 3 weeks' time, you're going to own the business. This is your problem. And then when you kind of get to that pre-closing period, it's a bit awkward because you're like, look, there's kind of no scenario where we buy a business that's about to stock out of inventory. So it's simple advice, but we see it come up a couple times in deals where, every week we just constantly remind the seller, like, keep purchasing inventory. Don't take your eye off the ball. Like, you've got to keep kind of running this as if it's not going to sell. Because it doesn't kill the deal, but it can kind of delay it and slow things down.
That's a really good piece of advice. And you can think of it too, I would assume, in the way of like, don't slack off on your job that you plan on quitting, even though you don't have another one lined up, and then you end up fired from the first one because you slacked off, and then you're just without a job. That's kind of what I equate it to, of like, don't take your foot off the gas.
100%. Like if you've got a growing business and you just take your foot off the brake, like you take your foot off the accelerator and it starts to peter out or go backwards, like most buyers will look at that and be like, what's going on? And so run it, just the best performing bit, like the best, if you're selling your company, the best situation that you can possibly have is each month it's growing a little bit. Because if it's growing a little bit and you've got enough inventory, it is very, very hard for a buyer to convince themselves not to do the deal.
Mm-hmm. And we've got Omar, I believe it's Omar, coming in from Margin Inc. If it's somebody else, I'm sorry, from Margin Business, saying really good point there. Prepare your business for sale the day that you create it. I agree. So there are so many like aggregators and, folks looking to buy e-commerce brands. How can a seller, so the brand owner, how can they know if the offer that's being made to them by one of these firms is illegitimate or like the best offer that they can receive? So I think of it as like selling my house. I think I know what my house is worth, and I can go to a realtor to get all of these different, bids, and I'm like, oh, I'll take the highest one. But when you're selling your business, how can you determine like your own valuation of what you think it's worth, and then see how the other ones stack up, and if they're good? Like, what can the seller do?
It's a great question. So there's two kind of pathways here. If you're going through, if you've appointed a broker to sell your business, they should do all the hard work to ensure that you've got the best value possible for your business when you sell it. And the simplest way is they'll be able to compare and summarize all the bids so that you can see that it's clear. If you're selling your business yourself, to ensure that you've maximized your value, my honest answer is go and speak to as many different buyers as you can. Pitch them your business, prepare a nice presentation that summarizes it, prepare a summary of the kind of financials of the business, this can be as simple as like a 5-page PowerPoint deck that sets out on page 1. Here's the summary of the business. Here's the 12-month trailing financial performance. Here are the key strategies that I'm going to implement or you can implement to grow it. And then here are kind of some of the, here's where my supply is based. Here's where some of the tools and people that I employ in my business. And here's, on the last slide, here's the date in which I'd like to collect LOIs or expressions of interest from parties in kind of 2 weeks' time. If you created a presentation like that and sent it to kind of all the potential aggregators in the space, I promise you're going to have calls with many of them to kind of be interested in your business, and then you're gonna get offers from many of them. So the key to maximizing value of your business is create competitive tension in your sales process. And if you've got competitive tension, you know that you're going to maximize the price of your business because you've got many interested parties bidding on it.
And so if you're going to sell your business through one aggregator or another and the deal goes through, like it falls through, what's the likelihood that you'll be able to sell it to a different aggregator? And are they going to ask for details as to why it went through the first time?
It happens all the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we've bought 4 businesses this year, and it's like there was a failed sale process, and we've relisted it on the market, and typically in each of those cases, it was actually better for the seller because the business had grown, so the earnings were higher, which means they got a better valuation, and then the multiples in terms of how much people are prepared to pay for these businesses improved as well. So in each case, like the outcome for these sellers was like much better if they'd sold it, a couple months earlier. So the good news in this kind of space is, most businesses have got very strong earnings profiles. The sale process here, it's 30 to 60 days is very, very quick. Mm-hmm. If you go back to kind of, mid-market, like if I look back at my career, it used to take us 6 months to 9 months in some cases to get deals done. And that was considered like a normal time frame. So to be able to sell your business in 30 days, that's pretty amazing. So it's not a huge impost on your life. And it's for most people, it's the biggest financial transaction of their life to date. So 30 days to kind of get it done is pretty, to my mind, is pretty manageable. But yeah, if the sale process falls over and you've got multiple interested parties, you can still go back to everyone and just ask them to reconfirm their bid. And for many buyers, like if you're unsure about how a business is trading or you're not sure about the trend, if they come back and, you've got another 2 months of data and the trends are improving, then, that's great. You in some ways it could make you more interested in buying the asset. So we looked at a business and we missed it. And then, they went through to final underwriting. The seller couldn't close on it. But when the business came back to us, we're like, we were kind of, 50-50 on the fence about it. But when it came back to market, we're like, well, this thing's, it's the strong growth that we saw is continuing. Let's take it down. And we managed to lock it in. So, there's always a silver lining in there somewhere if it doesn't work out the first time.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And you had said when you were sending out those quotes, sorry, Francois, I just have one more question.
No, you're fine.
When you were sending out those, the presentations or, inquiries to the aggregators, that there was like a 2-week period of getting those letters of interest that you had outlined. Is that just because the sales process is so quick that you want to get everybody's bids in as fast as you can?
No, good question. So let me unpack that a bit. Best practice for when you sell your business is circulate all the information, give people a chance to digest it, give them a chance to meet you so you can explain the story and, let them hear it directly from you. Because there'll be things that, every purchaser will be interested in different things. It's just how the world works. So your presentation may or may not cover off on those, or they'll want to clarify certain parts of, whatever the materials you share with them. So give them a chance, whether it's 45 minutes to an hour, to just learn about the business directly from you, and that can be valuable to help them understand it and kind of maximize or put their best offer forward. So you do that. That takes a long time because potentially you could be speaking to 10, 20, parties. One advice I give to people is just start with 5 that you think, just based off, either their reputation or what you know about the industry. Start with 5 and approach them. It's less time involved from yourself, and go out and canvas offers. And then you give people 2 weeks to kind of put their final bid in, because that gives you enough time to go and speak to everyone. Because you may go speak to a potential purchaser, and then, the way that they think about growing the business or the growth strategies that they want to apply could be different to how you packaged it up and presented it to the market. So you can then go back to everyone else you've spoken to and said, oh, hey, here's another idea about how we could grow the business that you may or may not be thinking about. So running a structured process and getting everyone to bid on one day, that helps to create competitive tension. We've met some sellers who have come to market. They contacted us on a Monday. We scheduled a call for the Wednesday to meet them. That was when they were next available. So we met the seller. And then on Friday, when we came back to them with an offer and a presentation, to step through the offer, they said, oh, sorry, we accepted a bid that we received on Thursday morning.
Wow.
And we're like, well, how do you know that bid that you accepted wasn't going to be, was as high as what we were going to offer?
Yeah.
So giving yourself kind of a 2-week window before you commit to reviewing all your offers. It's just a smarter way of doing it. Yeah.
I guess that's where a broker would come in, right?
Well, some of the brokers in the market, the thing about the broking model is brokers get paid based on success of when the deal sells. So if your business sells for, let's say a broker makes a 10% commission. If your business sells for $1 million or it sells for 1.1, the net fees that accrue to the broker, for them, it's kind of less important when you just think about the total dollars. So the challenge with the broking model is a lot of them may or may not want to work harder for that extra kind of, $100,000 that goes to the seller or 10,000 that goes to the broker. For some brokers, they're like, well, just sell it because I want to, I'll take the $100,000 and move to the next deal. So whether you're selling a house, a car, a business, that's always the challenge with brokers, is that the way that the commissions are structured, the incremental upside for them may not be worth their may not be worth their time. And we've seen some brokers who fall into that category. Others, the better ones, don't. But there used to be some brokers out there, and there still are, where if you just arrive and present a bid that they think can get to close, they'll just tell the seller, yeah, you should go with these guys. Mm-hmm. So brokers, when you go and meet brokers, if that's the route that you want to go down, just ask them flat out, step me through, how are you going to maximize the value of the process? How are you going to design the sale process in terms of when bids are due to maximize the value? Walk me through some examples, or could you refer me to past clients as a reference where you've been able to maximize the value of their, the sale price of their business from when first bids arrived to the final price that the business sold for. So a few questions like that, that's how you can quickly weed out good brokers from bad brokers.
Yeah, it makes sense. I know the condo my mom just closed on, their broker probably could have got a lot more money. So, or their realtor. Yeah. I did have a question before though, because one of the biggest topics I think this year, even more so than last year, but it's supply chain. Yeah. Right. And it seems like the never-ending increase in issues when it comes to lead times, when it comes to port issues, domestic transportation, and of course, we're seeing this logistic cost go, 6 to 7 times what it was 2 years ago, which is nuts. Yeah. How is that impacting, I guess, this M&A space? Are we going to potentially see any sort of valleys in the near future because of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think a lot of businesses are coming off kind of, I guess, the opposite of valleys in terms of huge mountains, because a lot of businesses banked massive, one-off earnings last year from the impact of COVID-19. A lot of people who could stay in stock last year cut advertising budgets and increase prices. So there was huge kind of margin expansion. This year, when you look at what's happening, like PPC costs are going up and logistic costs are going up. So we're seeing in a lot of different niches, some worse than others, where margins are getting compressed. Our view is that shipping prices will start to improve, from Q1 next year. So I think what it means is you're going to have a bunch of businesses where they're going to be impacted by like a short term, or the economics going to be impacted by a short term kind of one-off, increase in shipping costs. The key is if you're thinking about selling your business, if you waited to say Q1 next year when shipping prices start to improve, you could basically say to the argument I would run to buyers is, look, my historical P&L reflects a one-off period of inflated shipping costs. I would like to adjust the historical earnings or costs of the product to add back some of that cost, so it looks more like a sustainable long-term expense line item. Otherwise, if you buy, don't do that, then I'm going to hold the business for another 12 months and then sell it then. So I think if you start to run an argument like that, sophisticated buyers will give you the benefit in part of increased shipping costs when it comes time to exit. But at the moment, like it is, we're not sure when this kind of period of inflated shipping prices will end, but it will. Prices will start to rationalize back to where they were.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of talk right now, I know, in the current administration, even of trying to break up some of these larger carriers, and some of them more domestic, which, it is what it is. Definitely not getting political here, but in regards to their valuation today versus last year, how is that impacted? I know we were talking about 4, potentially 5-time multiples, which is nuts and fantastic for sellers.
Yeah.
It leaves me to ask, like, why are you telling them all these secrets? But that's a different story. But how are they impacted with today's supply chain if they were looking to exit, let's say, this month or next month?
Yeah, good question. So, the benefit of a group like Elevate is our volumes are massive. So we've got global supply chain contracts. We've got a global 3PL footprint. So when we look at the economics of a business, if it is starting to deteriorate, one of the things that we look at is like, well, what would this look like under our ownership? And I think there's a bunch of sophisticated buyers out there that do the same math when they look at these businesses. And so if you like the brand and you think you can grow it, then there's an element there of you'll absorb some of that risk. Others won't, like people who don't have that kind of ability to price in some of that or absorb some of that risk. So I think for a seller, it's like, if all it takes is pulling together a 5-page presentation and going and speaking to, call it 4 to 5 players, that could take you 10 hours worth of work, 5 hours to do the presentation, 1 hour per page, and then a 1 hour conversation with each of them. Like, you're going to learn something about the value of the business. There's also a great website called Centrica.com, and it basically summarizes the multiples of a whole bunch of businesses which have been listed through brokers. So that's a great resource as well to think about, where valuations are sitting. One of the things I'd say is, I think earnings in e-commerce is from a bunch of businesses that we've seen are either flat or declining a little bit if people haven't done much to grow their brand from last year. There was a huge one-off sugar hit from COVID-19, and this year, brands have grown, but they're starting to deal with inflated shipping costs and inflated PPC costs. On the other side of the coin, though, multiples have gone up. So if you compare how much people would have made last year versus this year when they sell their business, I think when you run that math, they're going to make more this year. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense, but it also doesn't to me, just because of the risk itself. understandably, you have those international supply chains set up with the
Yeah.
infrastructure in the EU and Australia, I'm sure in Canada, Mexico, the US. So you understand the different trade lanes, how to most effectively distribute everything from the country it's being manufactured in, things like that. But I guess I'm still shocked that the valuations themselves today would be higher than they were at the beginning of this year, I guess, in comparison.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So two other comments there. So not all businesses are going backwards.
Okay.
Some businesses have been successful at increasing prices and passing that on to consumers. I think a lot of sellers are, like we're in an inflationary environment. Like a lot of sellers won't change price, but often we'll buy a brand and we'll increase price by $5, which could be 20% of the price of the product. And we don't notice a single drop in demand. And then you increase price again by $5 and sales pick up. And it kind of goes to the good, better, best philosophy of if people see something being priced at a premium, it must be a good product if it's got good reviews, like I'll buy that one. So often, some of the smarter sellers that we've seen out there have actually started increasing prices to combat some of these increased expenses, and their performance is still robust. So on that basis, like I'm not sure if your business is in decline and it's gone from making a 25% margin down to 10%, then yeah, like I think that's a real challenge. But if you've got a good enough brand and you've got a good enough product and great reviews, then your ability to start to pass some of those price increases on to the end customer, that's real. And sophisticated sellers that we meet are doing that. So, they're protecting their margins. Why are multiples going up across the industry? It's because groups, businesses that are going after this kind of aggregation strategy, the multiple that we're getting for our platform is much greater than the multiple of which the underlying assets are trading for. So we can raise capital and we can make these investments, and it's still kind of, at least for ourselves, like, it's positive, it's return accretive. So I think there's an element where multiples will remain strong and continue to remain strong. Just because of that dynamic of we're raising capital at a higher multiple than the businesses that we're acquiring at. And if you look at like any roll up that's happened in history, there's a point where the arbitrage eventually gets priced out. But in this case, like I think, e-commerce earnings are volatile, and there's only so much debt that you can put into this type of business. So I think that's something that will keep a cap on the multiples. I don't know how much higher they're going to go, but I kind of see where they are now as kind of potentially a ceiling for, the next kind of 6 months or so.
Yeah. I mean, that it puts things, it kind of comes full circle, right? To the beginning of our conversation about how important is a brand versus a commodity good, where a commodity good is always that race to the bottom, and an impact like shipping costs being fivefold is just something you can't really weather, because there's always going to be someone with just one little bit of a better supply chain that you just can't compete with. Maybe it's the partnerships that they have. Maybe it's distribution model that they have that's just better than you. When it comes to moving more of that upstream supply chain, what should they prepare when it comes to preparing their supply chain overall before even approaching someone like Elevate Brands?
Yeah, great question. I think the biggest thing that we focus on when we buy a business is, does this business have enough inventory, one, to get it through the next little period, i.e. the next kind of 90 to 120 days of sales, and does it have enough inventory that we can, grow the business? One of the biggest challenges is when we acquire a business is the supply chain needs to be able to scale with our growth ambitions. So if we buy a business which is based on Amazon.com and we want to expand it internationally, within kind of the first 3 months of close, like we want to have enough inventory where we can start to send it into, foreign markets outside of the US. So the biggest kind of roadblock to stop us from doing that is often the supply chain. So ensuring that, when you build your business, you've got a great relationship with your supplier, and that supplier can kind of scale beyond your current production volumes. That's key. And if you can demonstrate that you do have a big factory or you do have a supplier that is capable of scaling, it's just one of the kind of areas of focus that you can give a potential buyer comfort that your business can grow. Because if I look across our portfolio, where we struggle to grow a brand, in every single case, it's because the supply chain hasn't been able to scale the way that we want it to post-close. And that's whether we want to launch new products, launch different variations, or buy inventory for growth. That's been the biggest challenge. So for example, like we've bought some businesses where we've updated all the listings with new creative and optimized the PPC campaigns, and sales have increased by like 50%. And that occurs over like a 3-week period. And then when you look at how much inventory you've got, when you thought you had 90 days worth of inventory, you've only got 45. You're on the phone pretty quickly to China trying to order more. And if your supply chain can't really scale to match that, it becomes very, very difficult. So that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about.
And I'm guessing that's something that your team also reaches out to suppliers. Is that still in sort of the discovery phase? Like, are they still open enough to release who their suppliers are to begin with? Or is that something once you acquire them, you know who they are and you're able to reach out to them, have those maybe tough conversations about Chinese New Year's right around the corner. We have holiday season coming up. We have some level of seasonality to this, and we plan these marketing campaigns to scale that up. I guess, where do you find out that you have those issues? Is it after the acquisition?
So we don't buy any business unless we can meet the supplier, and most sellers are kind of nervous about it because, often these relationships are kind of supplier relationships are based on trust, and they've been forged over many years. And you introduce a new party, it becomes kind of it can become complicated for the business. So typically we do it when we enter the kind of underwriting process, we want to start learning as much as possible about the supplier as we can. And after we've kind of pushed through the underwriting process and have been able to kind of, tick off some kind of higher stream, more important threshold issues like the financials tick and tie, we don't close a deal without meeting the supplier. And that includes going and doing a physical kind of site tour of their facilities. We've got people based on the ground in China. We've got consultants all over the world that can kind of go and do these site inspections. But for us, like, we won't buy a business unless we meet the supplier in person, because it's that important that if you don't, then I think as a seller you should be questioning, like, well, if I was a seller and the buyer didn't want to go meet the supplier in person, then I'd just be questioning, like, does this person really know what they're on, what they're doing in terms of operating the business? Because you think about, like, when you build your business and you're trying to create products and launch them, like, how many different factories did you go and speak to? Like, launching a new product, one of the hardest parts is just trying to find the factory and getting all your product, your different samples made. So when we buy a business, it's a similar sort of process in terms of confirming that the supply is good and they can scale.
Have you made the foray into doing your own e-com brand and selling on Amazon?
No, I haven't. It's, I'm sort of the third co-founder of this business, so this is kind of my foray, if you like. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like your talents are definitely better put to use to scale up, and scaling is definitely one of the most I would say the hardest parts when it comes to supply chain, is finding out, I'm sure the conversations that you have with the factories are significantly different than what we've seen. For example, a newer business might try to have with factories. A lot of times their conversations are, maybe, can you make this product? Can you make it at this price? And can you sort of stay within this MOQ? Because I'm just testing to launch, versus like, hey, what is the factory output capacity? Do you have the proper MSDS reports? Do you typically export to these countries? Which are conversations that we tend to have at more of the brick and mortar retail level, or even wholesaler level, that quite frankly, they just know a different level of supply chain, which is the most vital part. So I'm definitely glad that you're able to provide those insights, at least into how important, probably the most boring of the entire e-commerce world is. And I realize it is the most unsexy part. It's not PPC, it's not branding, it's not influencers. It is supply chain. I would say it's one of the core foundations of any business infrastructure. Without that, you have no operations. You have no chance to even spend money on PPC. So I'm glad that you were able to just provide more insights on that too.
Oh, it's key. It's like, yeah, it's I can't kind of over stress how important it is, particularly for a business like Elevate where we want to scale it. Effectively our business just becomes a massive supply chain channel from overseas. One of the interesting things though that we found with our business is we tend to have better luck trying to scale the overseas suppliers than we do with the US based ones. With overseas, like if you want the supplier to increase capacity, they'll do whatever they can to kind of get that incremental revenue. Whereas, some of the domestic suppliers are like, well, I'm capped out and there's only so much I can do without building a new line. So, it's just one of the things. It's just one of the things that we kind of struggles that we think about. Like the gold plate answer to a potential acquirer is, look, here's the factory that produces my product. Here's how much they produce for me. Here's how much more they could produce for me. This is what would happen to unit economics if we started producing at those volumes. Oh, and by the way, if you don't like this factory, here's another one that I've found lined up, which is slightly bigger and keen to get going. No one's ever presented it to us like that in any deal that we've done. I've met one chap who had two factories making the same product. And that was really cool because he told both of them that you're competing against each other. And then it kind of became this like game of brinkmanship between both factories on who would create a better product at a better price. And that's how he managed that's how he just managed to keep a lid on things.
That's very
Which helps. Yeah, it helps mitigate a lot of risks, diversification itself, as long as you can manage it, right? As long as you can manage both suppliers, manage QC processes, make sure that they're both following the proper QA processes internally also. It's genius. I don't see why more businesses don't do that. They like to focus on one thing at a time, which is very much, Gilad told us this thing from, is it VAA?
Yeah, Galad's with VAA, the Virtual Assistance Academy of the like omnipresence kind of.
Yeah,
of
and
e-commerce owners.
He was describing it very much so as sort of this Superman complex where they feel like they have to do everything themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm glad now that we have, more aggregators in the space like Elevate Brands to be able to just say, hey, let us take care of this for you because we'll treat, we'll help your baby grow up to the next step. We'll take you from crawling to walking to running.
Right.
So that's exciting stuff, really exciting stuff. And I look forward to see what the space has to offer in the next a year even. I mean, it's accelerated so much in the past 6 to 8 months.
Yes.
The next year is going to be super exciting too. Do you guys have any crazy plans to do with the 250 million?
I think we're just gonna, like, people ask us what is it about the aggregator model that is kind of special versus an individual seller, and it comes down to, whatever it is that you do when you scale your e-commerce business, we've employed someone that loves to do every single bit of it. So often we find that entrepreneurs, they're very good at 1 to 3 things if they're lucky. And then the rest of it, they kind of don't enjoy doing or are not that good at it. So, for us, it's like we've got great people and each of those people, are very good at what they do. So when we buy a business, we find that just implementing like the little 1% gains in each of the kind of value components of your business, that can drive a big uplift overall. So for us, with the capital that we've raised, we're going to bring on more great people, build out better systems and processes, and use tech to kind of drive the business. And then on the back end of that, we're just going to acquire more great brands. So we're in the market where, I'm super excited. There's a bunch of like cool opportunities that we're looking at the moment, and I couldn't be more excited for where we are today.
Yeah, and we're excited to see what happens. And with that, we've actually met our hour mark. So go on ahead and take a minute to kind of plug Elevate Brands and let people know where they can get a hold of you if they have any questions, either about what you shared today or just about the company, or if they want to sell.
Yeah, if you're interested in learning about selling or want to sell, please reach out and have a chat. I think one of the things I'd say about us is we are very transparent. We're an open book. We think that will be rewarded long run with trust and opening yourself up to the ecosystem. If you'd like to reach out, please email me at Jeremy Jeremy at elevatebrands.com, and we can sync up with one of the team and explore your exit options.
Fantastic. And we've got that website on the screen and will be in the description as well, elevatebrands.com. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. Speaking to your team has been great. We've gotten to speak with so many awesome people, and we have one more. We've got Muzzy later this week. And
he's great. The supply chain guru, as we say.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I'm going to be able to get a word in edgewise between him and Francois. I'm kind of just going to sit back, sip some tea, and just be like, well, that's even a joke now. Well, anyway. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. For everybody who tuned in, thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard today, give us a like, comment, share with your network, subscribe to the show. Be sure to rate us 5 stars on Amazon, or not on Amazon. I do that every time, on Apple Podcasts. You can even write reviews on Facebook if you're turning in that way. But either way, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications so that you never miss a conversation with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce, just like Jeremy. Jeremy, thank you again so much for being here, dear.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.